الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله الله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة من أطاع الله ورسوله فقد رشد واهتدى ومن يعصهما فإنه لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الشاكرين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون صدق الله العظيم. My respected brothers and sisters, we are concluding the season of Hajj, and the season of Hajj is the culmination of the season of Ramadan al-Mubarak, and is also the last season of the year. Sometimes when we go through the fasting of the month of Ramadan and the activities of Eid al-Adha, we feel that now perhaps we are done with our basic responsibilities. But somehow we forget that these seasons are not meant for themselves. They are meant for something bigger than that. And that is ziyada fi ta'at and ziyada fil ihsan. These are the things which are wajibat, which are the mandatory acts which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has required us. But they are not meant in themselves. They are geared towards the bigger hadaf, bigger goal, which is justice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in the Quran, and mashallah, we recite this ayah almost every Jummah, because the Prophet ﷺ would always conclude the khutbah with this ayah. So this is the part of the sunan of khutbah, to recite the verse inna Allah ya'muru bil 'adl wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'idhukum la'allakum tadhakkarun, at the end of every Jummah khutbah. And this ayah is so comprehensive that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, inna ajma ayatin fil Quran li khairin wa sharrin hadhihi al-ayah, that the most comprehensive ayah in the Quran, which combines both the issues of khair, goodness, and also covers the issues of evil. All of those issues are covered with this ayah. Inna Allah ya'muru bil 'adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi. Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayhi is narrated to have said that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have not revealed any other part of the Quran and would have just revealed this ayah along with the ayah of wal 'asr inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr, these two ayahs were sufficient for Islam, for the believers, for the proper guidance. And some of the scholars, they have said that the rest of the Quran is explanation of this ayah. We are told that Qatada radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he used to say, لَيْسَ مِنْ خُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ إِلَّا أَمْرَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى بِهِ فِي هَذِهِ الْآيَةِ وَلَيْسَ مِنْ خُلُقٍ سَيِّئٍ إِلَّا نَهَى اللَّهُ عَنْهُ فِي هَذِهِ الْآيَةِ. There is not the fadila, the good habits, the makarim al-akhlaq, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not included in this ayah. And there are none of the radha'il, the bad habits, the evils, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not addressed through this ayah. And my brothers and sisters, if you look at this ayah, He did not say, Aqimus salah, wa atuz zakah, wa atimmul hajja wal umrata lillah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when orders over there, Aqimus salah, do the salah, atuz zakah, give zakah, atimmul hajj, complete the hajj. But He never uses the word ya'mur except when it comes to the akhlaq. Ya'murukum an tuwaddu al-amanati ila ahliha. He orders you to give the amanat to wherever they belong to. And then He orders, inna Allah ya'muru bil-adli wal-Ihsaan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders all of the human beings, including the Muslims, that they should establish adl. Now what is adl? Majority of the scholars, they have said al-adl and qist is i'ta kullu dhi haqqin haqqa. To give everybody whatever is due to him or her. So the adl is justice, and justice is the name of those universal moral principles which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promulgated in the Quran. And those rules, they regulate the human interactions and human relationships. Whether those relationships are connected with the family, between husband and wife, in the business transactions, in the social order, or in the political system or economic system, nothing of the Quran or Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and none of the ahkamat of Islamic Sharia are without the issue or the concept of justice, adl and qist. And in reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us that لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. That the essence of prophethood, the essence of all the scriptures, the essence of all the religion which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed is to establish justice. Now, nowadays, the biggest problem is that somehow we Muslims, we believe that adl and justice is only when it comes to the legal system. When it comes to the quda, the dispute between different people. But we forget that justice is the essence of the social order, the society where we live. So there's no discrimination based upon race, color, ethnicity. All the human beings are treated equally and given the equal opportunities when it comes to job, human dignity, and living a decent human life. And the utmost justice which is needed and which is required by the Quran is the economic justice. Because somehow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that in the world, the utmost injustice is going to take place when it comes to economic resources. And if you look throughout the history, you will see that all the wars, all the conflicts, they are either focused upon territorial conflicts or they are mostly based upon the economic resources. So that's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has focused so much upon the economic justice that most of the acts of ibadat, they gear towards economic stability, proper distribution of resources, and somehow happiness based upon the sense of caring and sharing. So whether you do fasting, what does it teach you? Learn there are hungry people, there are thirsty people, and when you are able to perform 30 or 29 days of fasting, you share your bounties through zakat al-fitr with those less fortunate members of the community. When do you do the hajj? What is the hujjaj doing at the end? Sacrificing an animal and sharing it with the less fortunate members of the community. When you and me, we are able to do the fasting of the day of Arafah, and we come and we slaughter the animal after Eid al-Adha, we also distribute it between our family, between our immediate relatives, and between the poor people of the community. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only is requiring us to share our bounty, so there's kind of harmony and stability when it comes to economic resources. But in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah ya'muru bil adl wal ihsan. That don't just stop on the day of Eid al-Adha and share your bounty, 1/3 of that animal, with the less fortunate members of the community. But learn that lesson, and throughout the year, go towards tasaddaq and ihsan and man. These are the 4 Islamic or Quranic terminologies. Number 1 is, whatever is wajib upon you, you have to do it because of the sense of duty. Now you go to the next one, tasaddaq alayna inna Allah yuhibbul mutasaddiqeen, as the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam asked Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, be charitable, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the people of sadaqah who go beyond the call of the need of the people or their obligations. So sadaqah is in addition to udhiyah, in addition to zakat al-mal, zakat al-fitr, the wajibat. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, not only ya'muru bil adl wal ihsan. Go from just charitable issue to being benefactor to other people. And then the last term which the Quran uses, yamunnu. Manna yamunnu is something which is even bigger than ihsan. When there is no expectation of any return, any praise, or even no possibility of return, that is called man. So remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us during these seasons to fulfill our obligations, to learn how to be charitable, and from there to become the muhsineen, the people of ihsan, who become benefactor to human beings, and then reach to that level where we learn to give and to share and to care without any expectation of any return, any praise, or even any hope that somebody will be able to return it back to us, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, my brothers and sisters, wallahi, sometimes when I see the Muslim community so much active during those seasons, in Ramadan, during Hajj, Arafah, and then everything goes back to normal, it seems that somehow we Muslims have understood that the essence of Islam is salah, zakah, mashallah, fasting, and during the days of Hajj, mashallah, sit on the TV and be part of all the du'as. But I can tell you, wallahi, my brothers and sisters, they were just the refreshing courses, the reminders. And our responsibility is to work towards the economic justice within our community, within our families, and work on the national level as well as on the international level. Now we live in America, and some of us, we know, when we compare it with back home, there is a lot more justice here than perhaps back home in many of the Muslim countries. Whether it's the legal justice, or social justice, or economic justice. Wallahi, my brothers and sisters, if you look into the figures and the statistics, somehow America, one of the best countries in the world when it comes to the social and economic justices, is not better off than many of the other countries. Yes, there are more layers. There are more, say for example, apparent faces which come in between us and those who are really governing or monopolizing all the resources, but somehow the situation is not very different from the other parts of the world. I know there's not much of the data which is available, but there's one source, the Survey of Consumer Finances, which is sponsored by the Federal Reserve Board, and they have been giving the statistics since 1983. In 2007, this is the latest they have given, and now they have come up with 2009 also. What they are saying that here in the United States of America, the data suggests that wealth is concentrated in the hands of small number of families. The wealthiest 1% of families here in America They own roughly 40% of the nation's net worth. 1%, they own 40% of the nation's, which is America's, wealth. The top 10% families own over 85% of America's wealth. And the bottom 40% of the population owns way less than 1%. 1% owns 40% of America. 10%, 85%. And 40% of Americans own less than 1% of nation's net worth. The bottom 60% of households possess only 4% of the nation's wealth, which means that the top 40%, they possess 96% of $5.4 trillion. Now, if you look into the statistics which has come in 2009, it tells you a huge share of the nation's economic growth over the past 30 years has gone to the top 100 of 1%. Not only 1%, but 100, which is 0.01. Not only 0.01%. Who now make an average of $27 million per year per household. That 100% is making what? $27 million per year per household. The average income for the bottom 90% of American is $31,244. Now, if you go into the more breakdown, it is really astonishing that sometimes when we see that there is so much economic justice, but you see and you look at the statistic, you feel that we are not better off than many of the other countries. The top 0.01% make 27 million. The top 1 to 0.1, which is 0.01, which is 100%, to 0.1% make $3.2 million per year per household. The top 1% makes $1.1 million per year per household. And the top 10%, they make $164,000, while the top 90%, majority of the Americans, they make what? $31,244 per year per household. Now, if you break down the data and mashallah compare the Walmarts and the Buffetts and Bill Gates, you will see that if we break down the data further, we will find that 93% of all financial wealth is controlled by the top 10% of this country. If you look on the other side, when it comes to the debt part, the bottom 90% have been settled with 73% of all the debt. In other words, much of their so-called wealth, even that 1% which they own, is connected to debt. And they are kind of slaves to the banks and the credit card companies and the house mortgage people. So even whatever they own is not theirs. It is the belonging of the bank or the mortgage company, or you can call it the credit card company. Now, this is not very different from the world. Yes, in the world, in some of the countries, you have got 1% controlling 99% of the resources, mostly in the oil-rich companies like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. Because the royal families, they own almost everything, and 99% of the people are living off 1% of the nation's assets. I was just looking at some of the faxes which have been sent from American Embassy in Riyadh to the State Department, and I just looked at one of them, and somehow it was shared by Prince Walid bin Talal with the ambassador of United States of America there in Riyadh. And what did he say? He said, revenues from 1 million barrels of oil per day go entirely to 5 or 6 princes, not including Prince Salah or Prince Wali. Then from them it is given to the royal family, depending upon who is the son, who is the daughter, who is the nephew. So you can imagine, and mashallah, I don't want to talk about them and forget about my country, mashallah, Pakistan. When I was born, it was controlled by 14 families. Now the number has increased only to 25. So Mansha Mian, mashallah, Zardari Mian, Nawaz Sharif Mian, Jang, mashallah, you call it Shawani, Bawani, just 25 families. Along with their businesses, they are controlling 98% of Pakistan. The rest of Pakistan is living off on 2% of nation's assets. Do you know that more than 50% of the world population is living under the poverty line, which is $2 per day, including food, including medicine, including clothing, including their residential payments, whatever. And mashallah, even you and me, we are living off $200 to $500, maybe $1,000 per day. Is this Islamic justice? Is this capital justice? Is this socialist justice? Many of you would be feeling that maybe Dr. Zulfikar has become a socialist or a communist. But this is not communism, this is not socialism, because they have not provided the solution to the world. This is what is your and my responsibility, my brothers and sisters. Because we have got almost the same system in our Muslim community. Some of us have got, alhamdulillah, more than enough. And some of us, we do not have even enough to put the food for our children or to have the dignified, decent life. And sometimes we are not feeling the pain of the others, and we are focused upon salah and zakah. MashaAllah, in Ramadan we become charitable. In MashaAllah, Eid al-Adha we make 2-3 udhiyah. And now we think we have got a rocket waiting for us on the day of judgment. And as soon as I will reach over there, that rocket will take me to the highest place in Jannah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not ask me about the people who were suffering, the people who were without medical insurance, the people who were not having enough even to take care of the basics of their life. This is what is the responsibility of every Muslim. Do not just go to the wajibat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordering you, inna Allah ya'muru bil 'adl wal ihsan. Go to the level of ihsan, where you have done your responsibility, but you go far beyond the call. And some of the scholars, they have explained these terminologies of wajibat and ihsan and man. And some of them have said justice or adl is to each according to his due or her due. Job, money, resources. Charity or sadaqah is to each according to his needs. To each according to what? His need. And what is ihsan? Ihsan is to each according to what? More than his or her needs. So that that person becomes like you and does not have to worry about the butter and the bread, and can focus upon the mind and spirituality and upon his or her relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the basic rule is that you put yourself in the shoes of other person and treat the other person the way you want to be treated by any other human being. Suppose if you were in debt, if you were without medical insurance, if you were going through all of these pains, would you like to extend your hand? Would you like to go 10 times to the brother to seek for help? And remember one thing. You know, that famous incident which I love to quote, that Hassan Basri rahmatullah alayh, in the middle of the night, somebody knocks at his door. And then what he does? He takes sword in one hand and takes money or dinar in the other hand. The wife, because she woke up suddenly along with him, and she says, Hassan, what are you doing? You've got the sword in one hand and you are putting the dinar in the other hand. What do you mean? He said, if the person who is knocking at my door is an enemy who intends to do something wrong to me, I will defend myself with the sword. Then why dinar? If the person is needy, I will extend my hand and ask him to pick up whatever he needs or she needs. Now, the person comes, he opens the door, said, what brought you at my door in the middle of the night? He says, haja, some kind of need. He extended the hand, and in the darkness, the person put his hand and got whatever he wanted without even Hassan Basri counting how much he has taken. Now he closed the door, sat down on the sword and started crying like a baby. The wife comes and says, Hassan, why are you crying? He said, I am a bad Muslim. Why are you bad Muslim? Somebody comes in the middle of the night at your door without looking at who he is and what brought him. You took the money, you extended the hand, and you did not even count how much he took. And you did not put any kind of limitation when that person is going to bring the money back. You should be happy and grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you are mutasaddiq. He said, no. Why I have to wait for my brother to come to my door and knock at my door and ask me, and then I will give him? I should have known that my brother is in need. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to treat me the same way. He is going to wait until I knock at his door, beg him, and then he is going to extend the rahmah, the hand of rahmah. My brothers and sisters, wallahi, many of us, sometimes we do not know that maybe this is the reason that somehow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not listen to our du'as, does not care how much we give sometimes. Because sometimes the feelings are very different. And I'm going to conclude it with that hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I'm making it very short, in which the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said that there are times when a person will be doing the kaba'ir, will be involved in something horrible which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates. But just because that person takes care of his family or takes care of his immediate relatives, silat al-raham, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open the doors of rizq, peace, izzah and karam upon him, just because of him taking care of his silat al-raham or the people who are connected to him in what? Motherly relationship. Rest aside those people who are poor, who are less fortunate, and imagine, wallah, here in America, at this time there are more than 37 million Americans who are without job. There are closer to 50 million Americans who do not have the medical insurance. They cannot afford to visit a doctor or see a doctor, and some of them are not imams that they get, mashallah, free samples from the doctors too. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of them. I mean, imagine, wallahi, if your son or my son will get sick and has to live off, mashallah, the Walgreens, the basics, you can imagine, without even prescription. Imagine what will be the situation. So just when you go back today, always come back every Jummah and reflect upon that ayah which we recite all the time, and without which the Jummah khutbah is not complete. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adl, Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan, wa ita'i dhil qurba, wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi, ya'idukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.